On a sweltering August afternoon in the small city of Crestwood, a routine traffic stop spiraled into a moment that would shake the local police department to its core. A black woman, pulled over for a minor infraction, faced a barrage of dismissive and hostile remarks from officers who had no idea who she was. Their words, laced with condescension, echoed through the tense air as they questioned her presence in the neighborhood. But when she calmly revealed her identity, "I'm your new chief," the officer's arrogance crumbled, replaced by stunned silence. This was no ordinary encounter. It was the beginning of Dr. Angela Carter's transformative tenure as Crestwood's first black female police chief, a role that would challenge deep-seated biases and force a reckoning within the department. Dr. Angela Carter, a seasoned law enforcement professional with over 2 decades of experience, had arrived in Crestwood to take the helm of a department plagued by complaints of racial bias and misconduct. Her appointment was historic, but not everyone in the city was ready to accept her leadership. The traffic stop, though unplanned, became a defining moment that exposed the department's flaws and set the stage for her mission to reform it. What followed was a journey of resilience, confrontation, and change as Carter navigated resistance, uncovered systemic issues, and worked to rebuild trust in a community long divided by mistrust. Angela Carter sat in her sleek, black sedan, her hand steady on the steering wheel as the red and blue lights flashed in her rear-view mirror. She had been driving through Crestwood's upscale Oak Ridge neighborhood, heading to a meeting with city officials, when a patrol car signaled her to pull over. The stop was routine, or so it seemed, a broken taillight, according to the officer who approached her window. Officer Daniel Harris, a 15-year veteran of the Crestwood Police Department, leaned down and peered into the car, his tone clipped and authoritative. "Ma'am, do you know why I pulled you over?" Harris asked, his eyes scanning her vehicle with suspicion. Carter, dressed in a tailored blazer and glasses, responded calmly, "I'm guessing it's the taillight. I noticed it was out this morning and planned to get it fixed." Harris raised an eyebrow, his skepticism evident. "You sure about that? This is a nice car for this area. Mind telling me where you're headed?" Carter's lips tightened slightly, but she maintained her composure. "I'm on my way to a meeting downtown. I work in the city." Her response, polite and direct, didn't satisfy Harris. He exchanged a glance with his partner, Officer Michael Reed, who stood a few feet away, hand resting on his holster. Reed stepped closer, his voice carrying a hint of mockery. "You work in the city? Doing what exactly? This isn't the kind of neighborhood we usually see folks like you driving through." The implication hung heavy in the air. Carter's jaw clenched, but she kept her tone even. "I'm a public servant. I'm sure you understand the importance of that role." Reed smirked, unconvinced. "Public servant, huh? Let's see some ID. And step out of the vehicle, please." Carter complied, handing over her driver's license and stepping out of the car with measured grace. She stood tall, her presence commanding despite the officer's attempts to assert dominance. Harris examined her ID, his brow furrowing as he read her name. "Angela Carter. Doesn't ring a bell. You live around here?" "No," she replied. "I'm new to Crestwood." "New, huh?" Reed interjected, his tone dripping with condescension. "Well, you might want to be more careful driving around here. We've had issues with outsiders causing trouble." Carter's eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't take the bait. She had faced this kind of treatment before, assumptions rooted in the color of her skin, questions designed to undermine her legitimacy. But this time was different. This time, she held a card they couldn't anticipate. "Officers," she said, her voice calm but firm, "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm Dr. Angela Carter, your new police chief." The words landed like a thunderclap. Harris froze, his grip tightening on her license. Reed's smirk vanished, replaced by a look of disbelief. For a moment, neither officer spoke, the weight of their missteps sinking in. Carter stood unwavering, her gaze steady as she watched their expressions shift from arrogance to shock. "Chief," Harris stammered, his face paling. You're the new chief?" "Yes," Carter replied, her tone devoid of malice but laced with authority. "I start officially next week, but I'm already getting a sense of the challenges I'll be facing here." Reed opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. The officers exchanged a glance, their earlier confidence evaporating. Carter took back her license, her movements deliberate. "I'll get that taillight fixed," she said, "and I'll see you both at the station soon." Without another word, she returned to her car and drove away, leaving the officers standing in stunned silence on the side of the road. The incident spread through the Crestwood Police Department like wildfire. By the time Carter officially stepped into her role as chief the following Monday, whispers of the traffic stop had reached every corner of the station. Officers exchanged uneasy glances in the break room. Unsure what to expect from the woman they had unknowingly humiliated. For Carter, the encounter was not just a personal slight. It was a stark reminder of the work ahead. Crestwood, a city of 50,000 nestled in the Midwest, had a history of strained relations between its police force and its black community, which made up roughly 20% of the population. Complaints of racial profiling, excessive force, and dismissive attitudes had piled up over the years, eroding trust. The city council, under pressure to address these issues, had recruited Carter from a larger metropolitan department where she had earned a reputation for reforming troubled precincts. Her credentials were impeccable: a doctorate in criminal justice, years of fieldwork as a detective, and a track record of implementing community-focused policing strategies. But in Crestwood, her race and gender made her an outsider in more ways than one. Carter's first day as chief began with a department-wide meeting in the station's conference room. The room was packed with officers, most of whom avoided eye contact as she took the podium. Harris and Reed sat near the back, their faces a mix of embarrassment and apprehension. Carter wasted no time addressing the elephant in the room. "Good morning," she began, her voice clear and commanding. "I'm Dr. Angela Carter, your new chief of police. Some of you may have heard about an incident last week involving a traffic stop. I was the driver. I was also the target of assumptions that have no place in this department." A murmur rippled through the room, but Carter pressed on. "I'm not here to point fingers or dwell on that moment. I'm here to lead this department into a new era, one where every citizen, regardless of who they are, is treated with respect and dignity. But let me be clear. Change starts with accountability, and I will hold every one of you to the highest standard." Her words were met with a mix of nods and uneasy silence. For some, her presence was a welcome shift. For others, it was a threat to the status quo. Carter knew she was walking into a minefield, but she was no stranger to resistance. Her career had been defined by overcoming it. Over the next few weeks, Carter immersed herself in the department's operations. She reviewed case files, sat in on roll calls, and met with community leaders to hear their concerns. What she found was troubling but not surprising. A pattern of complaint against certain officers, including Harris and Reed, for racially charged conduct. There were reports of black residents being stopped without clear justification, their complaints dismissed or ignored. The department's culture, she realized, had allowed these behaviors to fester unchecked. Carter's approach to reform was methodical. She introduced mandatory bias training, updated use of force policies, and implemented a system for tracking civilian complaints. But she also knew that policy changes alone wouldn't shift the department's culture. She needed to connect with her officers, to understand their perspectives and challenge their biases head-on. One afternoon, she called Harris and Reed into her office. The two men entered cautiously, their body language tense. Carter gestured for them to sit, her expression neutral but firm. "I've reviewed your records," she said, leaning back in her chair. "You're both experienced officers, but you've got a history of complaints, particularly from minority residents. I want to hear your side." Harris shifted uncomfortably. "Chief, with all due respect, we're just doing our jobs. This is a tough city, and we've got to be vigilant. Sometimes that means making quick calls.